And welcome back to Frankly Speaking Baseball, right here on WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. What a show we had. Just had the great Lee Steinberg. What a great interview we had with him. And, we talked earlier in the show about some of the teams in Major League Baseball and some of the more disappointing teams that we didn't really expect to be where they are at today. And one of those teams happened to be the New York Mets in the National League East. They're playing terrible baseball right now after winning 101 games last year. So it is a great honor, thrill, and pleasure to now bring into you on-air sports personality from WFAN in New York. Let's bring in Evan Roberts. Evan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm depressed because you reminded me that the Mets won 101 games last year, and they are a far, far cry from that right now.
Let me ask you this, Evan, because and we're going to mainly talk about the Mets today, but I have to ask you this. I grew up in Long Island, lived there the first 13 years of my life, grew up a huge Met fans in the 70s, with Seavan, Madlack, and Koosman and all the great pitchers they had back then. How disappointing is the city? Not when you just have the Mets not playing well, but on the opposite side of the Bronx, from Flushing, you don't have the Yankees playing well as either.
I think you could argue this has been, for both teams, if you combine it, one of the most disappointing baseball seasons of recent memory, because last year the Yankees got off to a start that almost reminded you of the 98 Yankees. They obviously cooled off. They won the division. We all know what happened. They lost in the ALCS. The Mets went 101 games. So we had this incredible summer last year where we're dreaming of Subway World Series, where there wasn't that much stress because both teams eventually cruised to playoff spots despite the Mets not winning the division. This year, the expectations were the same. The expectations were both teams at minimum are postseason teams. And here we sit in the middle of June. The Yankees are obviously in a better playoff spot right now, but they're struggling without Aaron Judge. The Mets are a mess. And I think when you look at both teams, not just one, because the Mets have had individually disappointing seasons, as have the Yankees, but when you combine the expectations we had for both, to have them where they are now, it has to be one of the more disappointing seasons we've ever seen from both teams combined. And I don't know if it's getting any better.
And we mentioned earlier, and I made you depressed, I'm sorry, by talking about 100 wins. Last year, 101 wins. What has been the biggest difference that you see from last year's Mets team to this? I mean, obviously wins, but besides wins, what's been the biggest difference year over year?
So everything has been worse, but to pick one, it would be the starting pitching. Because a year ago, when you look at the way Chris Bassett pitched, the way Taijuan Walker pitched, the way Max Scherzer pitched when he was healthy, and then all the fill-ins that they used. David Peterson is a forgotten-about guy, but he pitched well filling in last year when the Mets had injuries. Their starting pitching was very good a year ago, and this year, it is horrific. Max Scherzer's had a bad year. Verlander misses a month. He comes back. He's been up and down. Carlos Carrasco, who was solid last year, has a 6.5 ERA. It's everything to go from being a 101-win team to 5 games under 500. Like, their defense is worse, their offense is worse, the manager's worse. It's literally everything. But the number one culprit to me has to be their starting pitching.
Which player? I mean, we got a lot of players. I mean, I know a lot of people talk different. They talk Beatty, I've heard, Vogelbach. In my eyes, I still say Lindor, but I'd love to get your opinion on which player has been the most disappointing that you expected to really do well and just has not lived up to it.
I mean, there are so many. I mean, I'm not even joking. Like, Starling Marte has gone backwards. Jeff McNeil goes from winning a batting title to hitting the softest 275 you'll see. You mentioned Lindor. Lindor, oddly enough, I thought, over the first month and a half of the year, despite a very low batting average, was driving in a ton of runs, was hitting a lot of home runs, and seemed to be clutch. Over the last, I'd say it's about 3.5 weeks, it's gone completely backwards. Completely backwards for Lindor. So it's so depressing to say this. It's a little bit of everybody. I mean, literally everybody has gone backwards. And I think that's how you go from being a team that was a 101-win team to this. Maybe Max Scherzer's my answer, because despite his age, I figure if Max is out there taking the baseball every 5 days, he's going to be solid. And, he had the whole incident in L.A. where he gets suspended for sticky stuff. He comes back. He has an awful start. He puts together a couple of good starts in a row. And then in the two biggest starts of the year, in Atlanta against the Braves when they give him an early lead, against the Yankees where they give him a lead, he gives it all back. So, boy, I could pick one of about 10 guys, but to me, Max Scherzer may be their biggest disappointment this season.
And, you got frustrated like all Met fans. I mean, we're all fans, we understand that. And, sometimes things are taken out of context. And it was said, and you know what I'm talking about. You had made the comment about mercenary pieces of crap between two Hall of Fame pitchers that are going to go in the Hall of Fame, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. Was that taken out of context? Were you talking more about their performance and not attacking their character?
Of course. Now, I got a little emotional, I must admit. I think I recorded – that was a podcast I did called Rico Bronya, where I do a Met podcast along with the show I do on air. And it was right after they got swept by the Braves, right after Verlander had his awful performance. So, what they are Hall of Famers. I'll make something very clear. Max Scherzer is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Justin Verlander is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I know that. I respect that. As New York Mets, they are mercenaries, okay? They came here because they're paid a lot of money, and they're supposed to help us win a championship. As Mets, they have been awful. Some may say they've pitched like crap, okay? That's what I was saying, and that's the way it's been going. I mean, they've pitched badly, and Scherzer more so than Verlander, only because Max has been here a year longer.
Right.
And in the biggest moments, in Atlanta last year, final weekend of the year, against the Padres, game one of the wild card series, he's come up very small. That's the reality. It doesn't take away from the fact that the guy's going to go to the Hall of Fame. That's great. He's certainly not going to wear a Met hat. We know that. He ain't going down as a Met. He's been a massive disappointment as a Met, as Verlander, though Justin's got a little bit more time because he's only made a handful of starts as a Met. But they are here to win. They are here to pitch well. And both guys, to varying degrees, have not. And I would love to eat my words. I would love to be in a parade with those mercenaries. But right now, they have been, I'll try to be nicer, they've been bad.
But they both do have the ability, from what we've seen, to come back the second half of the year and make a difference.
I hope so, because really the only hope the Mets have is for that to occur, is for Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander to figure it out. Because all those other things we're talking about of guys having disappointing seasons, I don't think it matters if they turn it around, but the two aces don't. Like, they need Scherzer and Verlander to be at least close to what they were supposed to be. And all we can do is hope. Like, there's no change that's coming. There's no magic trade that's coming. Like, both of those guys need to be better. And I think the concern I'm going to have, the concern a lot of us are going to have, is that they're older. And at some point, Father Time wins. Like, there's just a time where you're not what you used to be. And clearly my fear, and it was a fair concern even when they signed them, is that are you getting these guys at the back end of their careers? Randy Johnson is an all-time great pitcher. The Yankees acquired him at the back end of his career. Tom Glavine is an all-time great pitcher. The Mets acquired him at the back end of their careers. No one thinks of Glavine as a Met and Randy Johnson as a Yankee. And the hope is Scherzer and Verlander are not that.
Well, I already said this, and that's, you mentioned Johnson, the great example too, is that you pay players for what they've previously done with hope that they'll do the same thing. So, it's the weird thing about baseball is we're paying people based on what they did in another town, saying, okay, come to New York and do the same thing. And that's not always the case. But I have to ask you before we get back to the Mets. I lived in Tampa Bay for 32 years after New York. Earlier in the season, you had made a comment that you thought the Rays were cheating because, here's the best team in the league, the second offensively, defensively, pitching, doing everything right. They have 8 players with double-figure home runs already. You've got to see them play recently. I don't know if you were there, but when they were in the Bronx, this is a good, solid, all-around baseball team. Yet, Evan Roberts made the comment is they have to be cheating.
No, well, hold on. So let's be fair. I never said they were cheating. I just was merely asking some questions. I was looking at journeyman players who have overperformed and saying, wow, this is peculiar. Now, some may have taken that as I'm calling them cheaters. I did not. I never used those words. I was merely wondering aloud about how they're pulling this off. And to their credit, they are an organization that seems to overperform every single year. And are they going to hold
on? Payroll, right?
They do it with the lowest payroll imaginable, with guys who are thrown aside from other organizations. So I was just marveling, I guess would be the word, at how amazing it had been, how all of these guys, or a lot of these guys, because they do have some good talent on this team that I have major respect for, like Wander Franco, Arozarena, McClanahan, maybe the best pitcher in baseball. Like, I acknowledge that. But there were a lot of journeymen having outstanding seasons, and some of them have cooled off. Mr. Walls has cooled off.
He has cooled. You know what? Is he batting 211 now? But he has 7 homers,
Yeah.
And he was a guy, that they didn't know if they'd even get a chance to play him because he played shortstop in the minor league, and so did Franco. So, and it goes to as we talk about the Rays and how great their front office is. And I got to ask you this question because I reported this a couple of months ago. Well, it was a question. And then it came out a couple of weeks later. I don't know what paper it was in New York, and I'm going to ask you the question because you're around the situation more than I am. Who's making the on-field decisions in New York with the Mets? Is it Buck Showalter or is it Ipier?
I think it's Buck Showalter. I think that Billy Epler and the front office certainly give information to the manager, maybe more information than ever before. It's not 25 years ago. Certainly Buck is collecting more information than he did maybe in 1995 when he's putting the Yankee lineup together. But ultimately, it's him. And so one of the frustrations Met fans have had, I've certainly had, is their handling of certain young players, specifically Mark Vientos. You call a kid up who'd been tearing up AAA, and you expect him to play and get a full opportunity. And while he wasn't great in the limited chances he got, it almost seemed unfair to him. And to me, that fell at the feet of Buck Showalter. He is the manager. He is the man who puts the lineup together. He is the man who decides, hey, I'm going to use David Robertson in this inning, and I'm going to use Adam Ottavino in that inning. So I think that because of this age we live in, and there are some organizations where the front office may dictate lineups. I don't deny that. That's not happening here. So I think the frustrations that any of us have should be at Buck. In terms of the lineup, in terms of the roster construction, of course, then Billy Epler's fair game. And I think a part of why the Mets finally sent Vientos down is because they realized we're wasting him away at the major league level when he's not getting a consistent chance to play. So I put those decisions on Buck Showalter.
How do you like Francisco Alvarez?
He's been great, especially defensively. Like the home run numbers will jump out at you. But one thing we had always read about Alvarez, because we don't have the ability to sit here and watch every minor league game, even though MLB app now makes it available, which is great. I can't sit there. I watch enough Met Yankee games. It's very difficult to watch, the Syracuse Binghamton games. But I'd always read about Alvarez. He's got a lot of work to do defensively. Well, I've watched him at the major league level for a few months, and his pitch framing is outstanding. His control on the mound, too, when he calls timeout and puts his arm around a veteran pitcher like David Robertson in a big moment. Like, he has shown a lot of confidence in his ability, and he's young. He's a baby. Obviously, the offense speaks for itself. He has shown a great amount of power. He's gone through batting slumps, but I think there's a confidence he's going to be able to be maybe a 30 home run hitter. And being a catcher who supplies that kind of power is incredible. But I think his defense has been the most impressive thing I've seen. And he plays just about every day, and he should. And I think he's hit well enough where now he's even in the DH mix when he does get a day where he's not catching behind the plate. But Alvarez has been fun to watch. He's one of the few positives in this dreadful Mets season that they have young pieces that are going to help now and certainly help in the future.
Talking to Evan Roberts on air sports personality at WFA in New York. A couple more questions we'll let you run. We know you got a show coming up soon. Evan, let me ask you this. You hear a lot of excuses and you take them with a grain of salt. And it was terrible what happened to Diaz before the season started in the World Baseball Classic. But as you watch this Mets team unfold, yes, he's a big part of the team. But he's not the reason they're losing, because David Robinson hasn't really done a terrible job in the bullpen, has he?
He's been great. He's not the reason they're losing. Are they better if Edwin Diaz is there? Absolutely. Like, look at Sunday's game. The Mets play a game against the Cardinals. They're down 5-1. They're down 7-5. They come back. They tie the game. Great. It's 7-7. They use Adam Ottavino in the ninth inning of a tie game with Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado coming up. Adam Ottavino gives up a home run to Arenado. Mets lose the game. If Edwin Diaz is healthy, Edwin Diaz is pitching the ninth inning. So you just have a bullpen that's deeper. So do the Mets win Sunday's game against the Cardinals if Edwin Diaz is healthy and on this team? Maybe. I mean, there's no guarantee. Doesn't mean the Mets score a run, but it means that when you have a deeper bullpen, you give yourself more cracks at winning a game. You look at the leads they blew in Atlanta against the Braves. If Edwin Diaz is there, does it help? Of course. So I can't tell you the exact number of games. Maybe the Mets win more than they have right now, but it's not the reason they're 5 games under 500. Are they better if Diaz is out there? Of course. I mean, yeah, they have a deeper bullpen. It's not just about, hey, Robertson's replaced them. I think a lot of it's about you have Robertson along with Edwin Diaz. So it's a big blow, but everybody deals with injuries. The Atlanta Braves won a World Series without Acuna. I mean,
Right.
the Cardinals a decade ago won their World Series without Adam Wainwright back in 2011 specifically, not 06, as we know. So no excuse. No excuse.
All right, last question. I'll let you run, Evan. Does this team still have a chance to bounce back, get in at least the wild card, and then make some noise in the playoffs?
They have a chance, but my confidence level is very low because we're almost at the halfway point of the season. They have not had a good stretch all season long, and I keep sitting there waiting for the hot streak to come. And I figured, okay, the Yankees without Judge, a Cardinal team that's struggling at home, 5 games, this is their chance. And they went 2-3. So every day that goes by, my confidence level, which is right now at about 25%, just dips further and further. Luckily, there's the extra wild card spots, but they got to get hot now. No more it's early. They have to start winning games and go on a hot streak now.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I always tell people it's not the team with the best record that wins the championship. It's this team going into it that's playing the best baseball. So hopefully time will help this team out and they'll be back to respectability like they were last year. Want to take my time to just thank you so very, very much. Taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule for you to join us on Frankly Speaking Baseball.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man. We'll talk when the Mets are in the World Series.
Sounds great, my friend. Have a good one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the great Evan Roberts, on-air sports personality at WFAN New York. Want to thank everybody for tuning in today. What a great, great show we had. Once again, we'll be back next week with some more great guests on Frankly Speaking Baseball.